it's supposed to be a foregone conclusion. If you also look at the activity of ECOWAS in each of these states, you will see what ECOWAS normally does is, at the beginning of the crisis, ECOWAS is always there. Will make all the necessary noise, propaganda, all. Then immediately after, once the pressure goes down, ECOWAS reneges. And that is one thing that, for me, as far as I'm concerned, it's just like as good as saying that, let's see how the event will unfold. And I will not also blame ECOWAS much, because majority of the members of ECOWAS are not financially upcoming, with the exception of Nigeria, that is always more or less like pushing the funding. And Nigeria is having its own fair share of economic crisis now. So for Nigeria to now begin to fund a military operation either in Niger or in Burkina Faso or in Mali will be a tall order. In short, the president, who incidentally also is the president of the chairman of ECOWAS.
Thank you for joining us on this edition of Weekly Top News. In this edition, we'll be focusing on the current situation in Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger. Burkina Faso leader, like Captain Traore, survived a counter-coup and made a series of changes. Traore is giving a hint that elections may not hold if the state of insecurity remains the way it is. In Mali, we will be looking at the incursion of the CMA. As they have continued to take over military bases that were once manned by MINUSMA and other connected issues like the 2015 agreement that has gone southwards. We'll also look at how the proliferation of firearms is strengthening the capabilities of these armed groups, especially in these three countries. Well, let's welcome our guest, Dr. Tony Ofoyetan. He is the Director General of the International Institute of Professional Security based in Lagos, Nigeria. And Dr. Tony, you're welcome. We also have Dr. Oluwole Ojewale, is ENACT Regional Organized Crime Observatory Coordinator for Central Africa at the Institute for Security Studies here in Dakar, Senegal. Dr. Ojewale, thank you so much for joining us and welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
Well, let me start with you, Dr. Tony. First short, reports are suggesting that what we're seeing in Burkina Faso may not be the last of a counter-coup. What do you think is informing this report?
You can rephrase the question again so that I don't
okay. So there are reports suggesting that what we saw happening in Burkina Faso last week, the counter-coup, may not be the last. And I'm asking, what do you think is informing this decision or this report?
Okay, let me start by saying I hope that it is the last. Although I may not be very, very strong in my hope and faith and belief. But those of us that are Democrats, we really wish and hope that it is the last. But having seen events, especially in the last 3 years, unfolding in the continent, sub-region rather, I think it will not be out of place to begin to think along the line of those that are thinking that it may not be the very last. And it's understandable. If you take, for example, the most recent one, Niger, that's without prejudice to the one that failed recently, you will discover that two major issues were hammered on. The issue of insecurity, that the former president was not handling security the way it ought to be handled. And of course, the issue of a natural resource or resources of the country, that they were being exploited, especially by France. And you saw it play out even in the diplomatic row between the military junta and France, as it were, to the extent that they have to ask French to the France ambassador to leave their country and all those stuff like that. And you would have also seen that France on its own have decided to withdraw its military base out of Niger and all those stuff. Now, if you look at what is happening in the sub-region, there are a lot of factors, but the jihadists is now capitalizing on those factors to also expand their own campaign with respect to their own agenda, as it were. So if you use the word jihadist, I don't need to go further on the explanation of what that connotes. But also looking at it from the fact that the international communities that are interested in the and the resources, the mineral resources of this region, are also using it as an advantage. Don't forget that a house that is divided itself will never stand. So you'll see situation where, taking example of even in some countries, I just want to be very choosy in some of the words that I want to use, knowing full well that we're on air. Some statements may be true, but you want to ask me further as to evidence and the like, and I may find it a little bit challenging getting such evidence. So I want to avoid it as much as I can. But I'm looking at international infiltration in the sub-region insecurity, and they're looking at who benefits the more. The jihadis have the advantage of the finance, and they also have the advantage of propagating their own beliefs across the sub-region. Now the international community have the advantage of mineral resources at the cheapest, but it has to be done through the greedy politicians among them. So it is possible that now, for example, one of the countries where you have a situation where the president was out of the country, where there was a coup, and unfortunately the coup failed, and the country came to say, no, it was not a coup and all those stuff like that. And now, if you look at what is happening, the interest of France, the interest of the United States in the sub-region, these are two major countries that have major stake in this sub-region. France has lost grip in Niger, but America is saying we are studying the situation. America has about 1,100 standing army in Niger, as a military base in Niger. Now according to them, trying to study the situation. It's not a matter of studying any situation. It's a matter of trying to see. Now, if we've been able to, if these guys were successfully got out this man that seemingly was working for us, or we were doing better business together, can we see a situation where it is possible to talk to this military junta in a manner that we understand? And if it is possible to continue the business with them, then we consciously or unconsciously legitimize. For me as a person, democracy, it's in quotes, because if you look at the different ways countries all over the world practice their own choice of democracy, you will see that it is not an absolute system of government that can be said to be the very best. North Korea has its own definition of democracy, whether you believe it or not. China has its own definition of democracy, whether you believe it or not. Russia has its own definition of democracy, whether you believe it or not. Now, the Western world, America, they have their own definition of democracy, whether you believe it or not. Now, the sub-region called West Africa now is having this conflict between capitocracy and democracy. Now, that conflict is always evolving because it gets to an extent you want to look at how can we go into revolutionizing our sub-region without, this clog from foreign exploiters and the like. Now, some military boys come overnight and say, okay, let's do it. Unfortunately, because of their greed, unfortunately, because when they get there, they see such enormous wealth that they've never been exposed to. They will forget the primary purpose and agenda and belief through which they decided to say, okay, let us take power. And that has always been the disadvantage of military coup from generation to generation. And I'm not too sure that what has happened in case of exception as now.
Yeah, let me hold your thoughts there and cross over to Dr. Ojewale, who is on standby. Dr. Ojewale, thank you very much for your time again. We're looking at MINUSMA now. We've seen them pulling out from these countries, Niger, Mali, Burkina Faso, even Guinea. Is this showing the true state of things in these countries? Because now you're very much aware that the Tuareg rebels are, are seizing much swaths of land, especially in Mali, and they seem to be competing with the government in power. What do you think about this MINUSMA withdrawal? Is it exposing what the true state of these countries?
Thank you so much, Imo. I think what is playing out now is obvious to everyone that in terms of security sector reform, these countries who claim to be diverting from democracy to maybe military authoritarianism now, they do not have what it takes to actually withstand internal security challenges like they are facing. And what we can see, even though there has been what some scholars have tagged as security logjam in the region, in a situation in which you have a lot of security architecture from foreign nationals, the G5 Sahel, Britain, the UK has their counter-terrorism operation, France has counter-terrorism operation, America has drone base in the region. So looking at what is playing out now, since these guys are now heralding themselves as the new generation liberation movement, and they are ejecting some of these forces out of the country, the center can no longer hold. As I'm aware, the armed groups are approaching Timbuktu in Mali. They are cycling Bamako. They are getting close to Ouagadougou. And then it tells you that rather than actually focusing on security governance in the country, which was the reason why they came into power in the first place, which is the explanation that they gave. As we have seen in literature, in experiences, the primary occupation of military government is regime protection. And how do they do that? They continue to withdraw soldiers from the war front, even in terms of internal security challenges, to protect the authoritarian person that is seated in the capital, and then to ensure that they also do not suffer from disloyalty within the military that is going to make some people to break the rank and probably remove them from power. So I think the spike is going to continue for the foreseeable future unless the country actually demonstrates what it takes to take on all these armed groups. And when you look at the proliferation of armed groups in the region, I'm in serious doubt that they are actually able to do this. Recently, there is the Litako Goma Charter that the three of them came together to say they want to sign in terms of defending their countries. But what you can see is that they are more eager to maybe resist external aggression potentially from ECOWAS, and they can't actually handle the rebel groups that are actually frustrating the people in the country. So I think we might continue to see this downward trend in the coming days unless they are a form of international support to keep pushing the whatever military and security architecture that these countries have in place.
Well,
summarize, we can say that the security architecture has been built on foreign support over the years, and now that they are claiming that they should leave, that is the reason why we continue to see these spike in attacks and the advancement on the part of the armed groups.
But would you be surprised if eventually we see that these groups, CMA, which is largely getting strong in Mali, you mentioned them, moving closer to Timbuktu and the central of the region in the coming days? Should we be surprised to see them take over government as it is? Or what do you think the present government can do to keep them at bay?
I think a lot of scenarios are possible in Mali as the days continue to unfold. The number one thing is that don't rule out the possibility of counter-coup in those countries. They are sitting on a keg of powder because everybody actually wants to taste power. And to the extent to which they see the man at the center, the man at the arena not getting the job done, some people can also break the rank within the military and seize power. That is the number one scenario. The second scenario is that when you look at the military capability of this country, they have not sufficiently developed that capacity to be able to withstand maybe internal or external aggression. And you can't build military capability in few days. It takes years of investment in military equipment in the army to be able to arrive at that. So I don't think they have that window of opportunity now. And what the foreign military bases have done for them over the years is probably to ward off those external aggressions or limit their capacity to strike on the state. So another scenario is that I do not necessarily see these people taking on power. But what I see is that they will continue to challenge the capability of the state in terms of monopoly of violence, and then the country might continue to spiral on the downward trend in terms of instability. That is one scenario. Another scenario, which I think is going to serve the interest of the collective now, is for this country to quickly realize, particularly the military junta, that they are living on borrowed time. And against hot, organize a free and fair election. The moment they are able to do that, you see that there will be a renegotiation in terms of even the countries that they have ostracized out of the country within the ECOWAS, and then there might be some semblance of instability in the coming days in terms of international support that they can get. But the military parading themselves as the new liberation rulers in the region, as we have more. If there is any lesson we are learning from this, is the fact that the military authoritarianism is not an option. You have seen it. It's playing out in Mali. It's playing out in Burkina Faso. It's only a matter of time, and I think it has also started playing out in Niger. Some soldiers were killed some very few days ago.
Yes.
The only country that appears to be off the radar for the purpose of international politics that nobody is talking about is Guinea. And it has its own obvious reason. I think the guy there is playing ball with maybe some powers that be outside the region. So, but these three countries are textbook examples of how military government cannot serve modern day in terms of delivery of democracy dividends, and how they can't also fulfill their basic responsibility, which is to defend the territorial integrity of these countries. They have failed woefully based on available data and standard. And the earlier they return the country to the path of normalcy, I think the better it is for the people and for the region at large.
Indeed. Dr. Tony, back to Burkina Faso now. After surviving the counter-coup, the man there, Captain Traore, said election is not in the sea at the moment, that he wants to secure the territory first before an election. Is this suggesting that we may not likely see an election in 2024? Because he is saying, look, security is first. So even if it's going to take me 5 years to ensure that Burkina Faso is safe, we will have to do 5 years before the election. What do you think, sir?
I think we should also look at, before this coup, they've already written to ECOWAS with respect to the fact that they don't have funds to prosecute the election. So now the coup is now coming, and the coup now becomes a veritable excuse through which you cannot talk about the extension of tenure. It is expected. Nobody gets to that power and want to live there just easily. In actual fact, what I am envisaging is that when the pressure is becoming too much, the man metamorphoses from the military uniform and puts on a civilian, contest, becomes the civilian president, and continues as such, and continue to amend the constitution to suit those that have supported him and all those stuff like that. But, having said so, no matter how we want to argue it, for the sake of the freedom of the people, there is no alternative to the people's rule, which is democracy. Democracy is one government that gives the people the voice and also the freedom to be able to express themselves, unlike the military junta, military whatever, dictatorial government and all those stuff like that. Now, if you look at what is happening now, why they will lose grip of security in all it, Mali, Chad, Niger, Burkina Faso, and the like, will lose grip, basically because the security has been strengthened before now on military enterprise and foreign enterprise, foreign patronages, foreign assurances, foreign strategy, foreign participation. Now that as it is now, there is no free lunch anywhere. Now, if you are saying that in exchange for us giving you relative security and respite, we are entitled to certain things, which could be the exchange of a natural resource at a very ridiculously good amount of money. Let me put it like that. Now, if for any reason you say you want to do it at the global international market, like what happened in Niger, that they have to move their unarium, or what do you call it, from how many cents now to 200 euro. And that became an issue because, of course, that is the international market price. And they felt that, look, France was buying it lower than expected and all those stuff like that. Yes, good enough. But having done that, there are things that France were doing that they had to now withdraw. Because if I'm buying at the normal market rate, then I should not also go to the extent of putting the lives of my men, at risk just to protect your region and all those stuff like that. Now, it also means that any adversary that is coming to your country, it's not my business. Now, for now, I don't know of tomorrow. These countries don't have the capacity and they don't have the capability to be able to withstand the attack of Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda is more or less that the central jihadist group within all these regions. Now, if that is the case, and of course, Niger is also having its own fair share of Boko Haram incursion and Boko Haram attack and stuff like that. If that is the case, to what extent do they have the arms and ammunition and equipment to be able to withstand these people? To what extent do they have the technology? To what extent do they have the finance? And what about the logistics and even the strategic approach towards suppressing terrorism within all these countries and this region? Now that becomes a very big and a tall order for these countries. Don't forget that these are terrorist groups that have been able to even withstand countries like the United States in Afghanistan. They withstood United States for decades. The United States was in Afghanistan for more than 10 years, and they faced that country in bullet for bullet, arm for arm, all that long until eventually they took over and all those stuff like that. Now you are not talking of this same set of people coming into your region. And these are people that they are ready to die, let me put it like that. Now, if the military junta is going to say our own central focus is security, now what is happening at the suburb now, as we speak now, is such that the jihadists are already coming in. Unfortunately, because they needed to consolidate power, they have also moved many of their soldiers from the suburb, they have moved many of their soldiers from the community, ran to the central area, just to ensure that the government, as it were, is consolidated and becomes acceptable. So for me, the issue of that they are extending because they want to make sure that there will never be secure. I'm sorry, I'm sounding this pessimistic, but they don't have that capacity. Look at a country like Nigeria, for example. As big as Nigeria is, Nigeria has the capacity and the capability to be able to do 10 times more than what any of these countries can do. Yet Nigeria is still fighting this thing called insurgency and is still seeking assistance at international level. Now, not to talk of a country like Niger, Burkina Faso, Mali, and all those stuff like that. They are relatively small. And of course, we all know that the interest at the end of the day, God forbid that we are now looking at something like maybe what you have in Democratic Republic of Congo and the like, where you have people that will be exploiting the mineral resources of the country. You have people that will be called the rebel group. You have those that are government, and those that are exploiting the resources, they will liaise with the rebel group. They will also liaise with the government, and they have free passage in and out. And at the end of the day, the country becomes poorer. The country is more vulnerable, is more exposed. Meanwhile, those that are exploiting the natural resources, they become richer and other. So for me, as far as I'm concerned, I think that if they do not understand the essence of this and come back to democracy as early as possible, it would only get worse. It cannot be such that, because you don't have now, who are you going to run to now? Now they've been able to talk about, they said they have the alliance of the Sahel states, which is made up of Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso for the purpose of what? Defense cooperation. Now that pact, as we speak now, has it come to effect? You've been able to enter an alliance for the purpose of defense, but have you been able to explore have you been able to execute it? How many personnel will each of those countries bring? Who is going to superintend over the training, the logistics, and the funding of this personnel? To what extent is this personnel going to be effective if you feel that you have ECOWAS there? And ECOWAS is the big brother as far as it is now. And ECOWAS is saying all of you should go back to democracy. So will you be able to raise up such army that will be able to stand against ECOWAS? And don't forget that ECOWAS also have the patronage of Western support. Let me put it like that. So at the end of the day, it may be a tall order. So it will get to an extent where what they will be looking for will just be soft landing. Get as much as you can get, maybe to be able to meet your greed within a period of time. look for soft landing. The soft landing can be metamorphosed to a civilian president, and if it is not feasible, look for a stooge to put there and run away.
Well, Dr. Ojewale, let's talk about proliferation of arms. We're seeing, arms flying left, right, and center, and it seems to be very easy to acquire an arm if you want to these days, especially in the Sahel. Where are these arms coming from?
Yes, arms are coming from foreign fighters who are relocating from Yemen, Syria, and other Middle Eastern countries that are in a state of conflict or turmoil. Harm comes as far from Central Africa to the Sahel, and then coming from different, even from the waterways, the coastal countries, the littoral states. But much more important is the locally fabricated arms. If you see what the bandits in the northwest are using now, or some armed groups that are also in the Central Sahel, whether Niger, there is a big industry that is now producing arms, particularly the guns, for some of these armed groups in this region. And for me, the greatest concern now is that I can see that the military administration in all this country apparently do not have a strategy for actually moving the countries forward. I think their action or inactions are now creating what some experts call VUCA, that is an environment that is volatile, that is uncertain, and then that a lot of things can just happen within that atmosphere, in which at best you can describe it as a governed space. You don't know a lot. For instance, if you look at Niger, apart from the southern belt where you have Niamey, Agadez is a no-go area. All these other regions in different regions, these are places that arms are percolated through that to come into the country. So the bigger challenge for me now is that countries like Nigeria, countries like Ivory Coast, countries like Ghana, they really need to brace up by virtue of the mess that is going on in the Sahel now. Because when the house completely collapses and breaks down, these are the places where arms will be flowing to freely. These are the places where recruitment can become easier for these armed groups. These are the places where attacks, sporadic attacks, can actually be taking place. And it's because of the free flow of arms now. Like I said, they are preoccupied with regime protection and then opening up the frontiers for easy movement of arms. And when you even look at the military capability of this country, I'm aware, according to, I think, 2023 assessments, Niger has less than 10 tanks. So when you look at capability of some of these countries, in terms of the policing, in terms of border security, in terms of capability of the military itself, they do not have what it takes to actually withstand the free flow of arms. And that is the reason why I think the shortest route, the shortest path to solution for this country is to see how they can conduct a free and fair election. That is going to open up a lot of opportunities for collaborations, for inclusion with internal and external stakeholders, at least to get things back to where they were. By every available standard, we can see now that security has deteriorated in some of these places. And the more it festers, we are in danger in Nigeria. We are endangered in Ghana because countries are interlinked, so to speak. So in terms of arms, it is just a free entry and free exit now, if you can use an economic term. That is what is taking place now. They can't police the borders. They cannot police the borders. And I can tell you to anchor on this. In Africa, Niger represents one of the largest arm market. I'm talking about illicit arms in the country because it's a pivot state from Chad, from Algeria, from Libya, from even littoral state. So the earlier we nip this thing on the board, the better it is for all of us. The soldiers, those guys just want to create a mess. They do not have any strategy, and they are possibly confused now as to what to do. So I think the more they open up, possibly they can get solution about how to get out of this.
Indeed. Well, in rounding off this conversation, we really don't have much time. Dr. Tony, where would you place ECOWAS at this point? You heard Dr. Ojewale. This country seems to be confused as it is right now. Where should we place ECOWAS, and what do you think ECOWAS can do? Please, you can unmute yourself. Please, you can unmute yourself.
Okay. ECOWAS, to me, is trying to tread cautiously as it is now. If you remember the vigor with which they came on Niger, after the whole hue and cry, antagonism with respect to military option, you see now that the ball game has changed. Now, they are looking at it more from an indigenous perspective, much more than from the foreign pressure perspective. So if that is the case, I actually see ECOWAS as being helpless, helpless, very, very helpless. I'm not envisaging that ECOWAS will take any fundamental step for now. I'm not envisaging that at all, because whatever step they take, they may have internal antagonism. They may have people that would also betray. If you talk about military option, for example, be rest assured that there will be personnel that will betray that option at the end of the day. So ECOWAS is just being careful. ECOWAS is trying to allow events to unfold, at each country level. Because if not so, Burkina Faso is not supposed to be talking about funding for election, even before the issue of this coup, whatever now. It's supposed to be a foregone conclusion. If you also look at the activity of ECOWAS in each of these states, you will say what ECOWAS normally does is, at the beginning of the crisis, ECOWAS is always there. Will make all the necessary noise, propaganda, all. Then immediately after, once the pressure goes down, ECOWAS reneges. And that is one thing that, for me, as far as I'm concerned, it's just like as good as saying that, let's see how the event will unfold. And I will not also blame ECOWAS much, because majority of the members of ECOWAS are not financially upcoming, with the exception of Nigeria, that is always more or less like pushing the funding. And Nigeria is having its own fair share of economic crisis now. So for Nigeria to now begin to fund a military operation, either in Niger or in Burkina Faso or in Mali, will be a tall order. In short, the president, who incidentally also is the president of the chairman of ECOWAS, is most likely going to have a backlash from the home. So they are just being careful and being diplomatic, as it were. And that was why you see that what happened recently, even the United States, they were saying that they were not too, that ECOWAS was not bringing the zeal it ought to bring in with respect to the maintenance of democracy in the sub-region. And that if they need to do anything, they most likely will do it. But of course, we understood the implication that what they wanted to do was to use ECOWAS as a machinery through which to drive that pursuit for democracy. But because ECOWAS was not forthcoming the way they expected, they were, and as it is now, it's more or less like a log jam. The military are confused, they don't know where to go and how to go about it. ECOWAS itself is being very careful. And of course, it's also helping the military in terms of purchase of time. But the jihadists now are not going to speak the language that I think will be favorable to external pressure.
Let me take the closing remarks for ECOWAS, 5 minutes, so that we can close the conversation. What should we be expecting? Right now, there seems to be a lull in terms of negotiations between ECOWAS and Niger, and of course, we don't know what the other two countries are doing. Burkina Faso, not too willing to hold elections next year. What should we be expecting in the coming days? Dr. Ojewale, this is for you, as we conclude.
Yes, it's a matter of time, because election will surely take place in those countries, whether the military guys like it or not. And I think I've said it on this platform that they need to realize that they are living on borrowed time. So if they don't leave ceremoniously, there might be internal rebellion that is going to get them out of the office, and that is not going to be palatable for everybody and the region at large. So in terms of ECOWAS, I think based on my reading of the event, and I think I've also shared here before, I knew that this was going to end on the table of diplomacy. War, thinking about a military invasion, no matter how clinical it is in the Central Sahel, is going to worsen the situation. And I think that is the reason why America has taken a different standpoint right from the beginning. So ECOWAS will continue to engage and then see the possibility of holding election in some of these countries. The target ECOWAS give them is until 2024, and I think it's still early to think election is not going to hold. I am persuaded that elections will hold. And if you can see, if you can read events very clearly too, which I think the public can also do, anybody following development in those places, you can see that with the exception of probably Niger now, Burkina Faso and Mali are obviously getting overwhelmed. The implication of that is that just like we've seen in Nigeria before, at some point, these guys are going to step aside and say, have your way. So to the extent to which ECOWAS and international partners and stakeholders can continue to mount subtle pressure on them, I think that is the only path to solution. It is only diplomacy that is the way out of this. As you can see, ECOWAS will still come out for what I call, for the purpose of strategic planning, or what the military people call strategic ambiguity. They will tell you that the military option is still on the table. But from event, you can see that diplomacy has overtaken that, and which is the way to go, which I also support that. So I think ECOWAS will continue to put some subtle support, pressure on those countries. More, what I cannot say now is that I don't know what lies ahead for Bazoum, and I think I'm going to hang on that.
Thank you very much for your views and for your time. Dr. Tony, thank you so much for joining us all the way from Lagos and being a part of this program. Thank you, gentlemen, again. We appreciate your contributions, and we hope that peace, which we are all calling for, craving for, will eventually come and stay in West Africa. Thank you very much, and do have a good afternoon.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah. Bye.